Yes. Can you all see the screen today? Oh, you can. Okay, good. Yes. If we remember quite well, the last time we were dealing with that detour in the wilderness and all the things that occurred in the wilderness. So I've put a summary of everything that happened. We remember there was a rebellion. So this is the end of the long march, but the beginning of the long wars, because that's when they begin to fight for the promised land. And remember, in the beginning, I said they didn't come across any nations from Egypt up until the desert of Paran. But simply because of the direction they have to take after their rebellion, they now have to they have to face or maybe enter Canaan land from the eastern side. That's why they have to pass through the nation like Edomites. They have to pass through the lands of the Moabites, Amorites, and all that. They have to fight some of them, obviously, and then some of them they have to try and appease them, ask for a safe passage so that they should be able to reach their final destination. So this is the lessons that we'll be dealing with today. After the long treacherous march full of unpleasant drama and gripe, finally the children of Israel were close to the promised land. They encamped in the plains of Moab. That's where Balak commanded Balaam to curse them but instead the curse was turned into a blessing. I know we know of that incident when the donkey was compelled to speak. God's wrath fell upon all men when they were in Moab, in the place of Moab or around the lands of the Moabites. God's wrath fell upon the men who committed sin. They are all killed by a plague. We will go into that as we proceed with our lessons. All the older generation had perished in the wilderness, and Moses is now leading the new generation, or whom we affectionately refer to as the Joshua generation. Now, the second census had to be conducted in the book of Numbers chapter 26. You can read that on your own, by God's command for admin and military purpose. Moses was commanded by the Lord to choose his successor and present him before the nation. The beginning of the wars for Canaan, the conquering of the Amorites' land, and the first land distribution begins. And laws pertaining distribution of the land and cities of Levites and cities of refuge, we are going to be dealing with that as well. And law pertaining property inheritance for daughters. Yes. Now let's sum up and let's look at what happened in the last lesson we did, so that there should not be a disjoint. In Kadesh, if you remember quite well, Miriam died and God buried there, and the children of Israel rebelled against God because of thirst. That's when Moses was compelled to go and speak to the rock, or strike the rock instead of speaking to the rock. And that's when God's anger was extended to Moses too and Aaron, and they were told that they too are not going to reach the promised land. We remember about Korah's rebellion when he was challenging Aaron's leadership, or Moses and Aaron's leadership, and God punished them by making sure that they are swallowed by the earth. Then God, afterwards, to settle that debate, he asked all the leaders of the children of Israel to bring their rods, and the one whom God had chosen, a sign will be that his rod will bud or will grow flowers. And Aaron's rod was the one which was able to bud. Afterwards, as they move on, Aaron dies in Mount Hor and is succeeded by his son Eleazar. Edomites refused the children of Israel a thoroughfare, and they were compelled to take a long route. Then along the route, in the place called Homama, Israelites defeat the King Arad, one of the Canaanite nations along there. Like I said, that the route that they were taking, they were going to come across a lot of nations, unlike the northern route that they have taken before. Along the long march, they murmured and complained. God sent venomous snakes to bite them, but when they repented from their sin, God shows mercy by commanding Moses to make an image of a bronze snake and elevate it to a high ground, so that everybody who was beaten but fixes their eyes on the bronze stake would live but not perish. In a place called Bia, the nobles were commanded to dig a well so that they could all get water. And then from the coast of Edom, they have to march up to the Moab country. That's where our story begins. Yeah. As you can see in the map, I have highlighted in red. This shows where the place or Moab is, and you can see if you go up a little bit in the very same map, there's Mount Nebo. That's where Moses died. So they came there for quite a while, and that's when they conducted the second census. Now it means that this is the third phase and the last phase of the journey. And after Moab, you can see that there's River Jordan, and then you can see Jericho and Gilgal and all. Those are the, remember, after they crossed Jordan, the first place they came into was Gilgal, and then they went into Jericho. That's the beginning. That was the beginning of Canaan land. But we will deal with that as time goes on. I just wanted to show you where we are. You're looking at the purple thing there from Ramses up until there. It shows how they journeyed and wandered in the wilderness. We can go on. There's this map. It's similar to the other one, but it's got some footnotes in them, and it just says what it states all the events that occurred during the journey in all those places which were highlighted. So some very interesting events occurred when they were in the land of Moab. The king of that nation was terrified. His name was Balak, by the multitudes of Israel, and he sent the nobles to get him a certain prophet called Balaam to curse them, so that when he goes into battle with them, he should defeat them with ease. Unfortunately for Balak, Balaam's curses were turned into a blessing, because the latter met the angel of the Lord, who commanded him not to curse God's people, but should only take instruction from God. And on this journey to meet the king, the king's name was Balak. That's Balaam going to meet Balak. Balaam going to meet Balak. Then along the way, the donkey saw the angel of the Lord with a drawn sword, and then it refused to proceed. And then he beat it up, but it still stood its ground. And I will read this from the Bible, from Numbers chapter 22, verse 1 to 4. Then the Israelites traveled to the plains of Moab and camped along the Jordan across from Jericho. Now Balak's son, the son of Zippor, saw that Israel had done to the Amorites, and Moab was terrified because there were so many people. Indeed, Moab filled with dread because of the Israelites. The Moabites said to the elders of Midian, "This horde is going to lick up every ground as an ox licks up the grass of the field." So Balak, the son of Zippor, who was the king of Moab at that time, sent messengers to summon Balaam, son of Beor, who was at Pethor near the Euphrates River. In his native land, Balak said, "A people has come out of Egypt. They covered the face of the land and settled next to me. Now come up and put a curse on these people, because they are too powerful for me. Perhaps when I will be able to defeat them and drive them out of the land. For I know that whoever you bless is blessed, and whoever you curse is cursed." So that goes the story of a talking donkey. The prophet, I don't know if it was God's prophet also, because they say whoever was cursed by this man would be cursed, and whoever was blessed by this man was blessed. And if you read that particular chapter, God would appear to him in a dream and tell him exactly what to do. So it shows that he was getting the message from the Lord himself. That's why the angel of the Lord appeared to him, and he blessed the children of Israel. You'll read that chapter in totality on your own. Then, since they realized that they failed to curse the children of Israel, the very same Balaam, who was the prophet, decided to make sure that the children of Israel falls into a trap of sin. So the men of Israel are seduced by the Moabite women to indulge into orgies with the Moabite women. This was Balak's idea so that he could not curse them. So because he could not curse them, he made them sin so that they should earn the God's wrath. Moses was shocked and disgusted by the sect. He commands the tribal leaders to kill their fellow men who were involved in this abomination. And while they were still weeping, one Israelite man brought a Midianite woman into a camp right before the eyes of Moses and the whole assembly of Israel, while they were weeping in the entrance of the tent. Then Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, saw this. He left the assembly, took his spear in his hand, and followed the Israelite into the tent. He drove the spear into both of them, right through the Israelite man and the woman's stomach. Then the plague against Israel was stopped, but those who died in that plague were numbered 24,000. And if you read the book of Corinthians, Paul is talking about the very same thing, that you should not give yourself up into fornication, because some died, 24,000 died in the wilderness after doing that. Later the Lord commands Moses to attack and kill Midianite people. An army of 12,000 men, 1,000 from each tribe was chosen. They utterly liquidated that nation, save for young virgins. While Israel was staying in Shittim, it's in the Bible from Numbers chapter 22, 1-4, the men began to indulge in sexual immorality with the Moabite women, who invited them to the sacrifices to their gods. The people ate the sacrificial meal and bowed down before the gods. So Israel yoked themselves to Baal of Peor, and the Lord anger burned against them. So this is a nation that was not willing to change. This was a nation that would still go back to their old evil ways. The Lord had given them his ways, his laws to sanctify them, but they would still go by the ways of the pagans. They would still conform to the pagan ways. So after the plague, the Lord said to Moses and Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, this is the second census conducted now. Remember, everybody now had died, save for Moses. Now is the only surviving of the old crew, Joshua and Caleb, who are, by the way, the only ones who are supposed to be in the promised land. So he took a census, the families of those 20 years old and above. So in the plains of Moab, close to the Jordan River, near Jericho, Moses and Eleazar the priest spoke with them and said, take census of them 20 years old or more, as the Lord commanded Moses. And so after I call them the terrible ones. So after the terrible ones had perished in the wilderness, God commands Moses and Eleazar to conduct the second census. So this time around, total number of men was 20 years and above was 601,000. If you remember the first census, they numbered 603,000. So this time around, they numbered 601,000. Now this time around, the Levites are also counted, but their numbers was not included in the general census. Total number of Levites was 23,000. It makes sense that the Levites should not be the biggest of the tribes because they didn't have their own land, if you remember quite well. They were eating everything or consuming everything that was given to them by the people of God because they were of the service of the Lord. Now, think of it this way. If they were big in numbers, they were going to be a heavy yoke on the whole nation. I hope I'm making sense. Let's continue. So now Moses is told to ordain Joshua.
We have Joshua.
Yeah. So the Lord said to Moses, That's in Numbers 27, 18 to 23. Take Joshua the son of Nun, a man whom is the spirit of leadership. Lay your hands, have him stand before Eleazar. Eleazar is the one who's doing the ordination because he's a high priest. You remember he replaced his father, Aaron. Now he's now ordaining someone who's going to replace his uncle Moses, right? Have him stand before Eleazar the priest and the entire assembly and commission him in their presence. Give him your authorities so the whole Israelite community will obey him. Think of it this way: if after Moses had passed on, they didn't know who was chosen to succeed, there was going to be some excitement and pandemonium. Now Moses is doing this while he's still alive and introducing him to the nation while he's still alive. And I love this verse where it says, so give him some part of your authority so that when you're gone, he shouldn't be totally clueless. Because you can't start governing as soon as the other person is gone. You'll make a lot of mistakes. But if he's still there with you and introduces you bit by bit to everything, guides you and everything, you're not going to be totally dismayed when you get into a leadership position. So the Lord says, give him part of your authority so that the community should obey him. So Moses was to separate duties. He would choose the duties that he would want him to do and that he, Moses, still feel comfortable to do. Yeah, that's how it is. That's how leadership goes. At his command, at his command, he and the entire community of Israelites will go out, and at his command, they will come in. So it's to make sure that there's peaceful transition and there's no rebellion. Remember, Moses, nobody ever introduced Moses to the children of Israel. That's why some of them had doubt. They questioned him along that. We were staying in Egypt land, and this man just came and told us that the Lord sent him. And we are not even sure that he sent him. Now we're making sure that God was making sure that the next generation is not going to have the same problem like the ones who came before them. So Moses did as the Lord commanded him. He took Joshua and had him stand before Eleazar the priest and the whole assembly. Then he laid his hand on him and commissioned him as the Lord instructed through Moses. And you'll find that story in Numbers 27, verse 18 to 23. Joshua too was chosen by God. Moses didn't choose someone he liked. Because we do, as human beings, we have favorites. That's why God told him that go and choose Joshua the son of Nun. And he was ordained publicly. It was a known thing that as soon as Moses is no more with us, this is the man who's going to lead us. And one other thing I have already highlighted, I can't overemphasize it, had to give him part of his authority while he was still alive. It's very important so that someone should not find himself clutching straws and making the nation to go astray simply because he didn't know what to do. He was just observing. Now, I love this part more than most parts. Yes. I like studying wars and stuff like that. So this tickles me, yes. So while they were in the land of Moab, I'll keep on referring you to, if they could have listened to God, they were not gonna have to come across some of these nations. For them to come across Og and Sihon, the king of Bashan and Heshbon, it was not by God's design. It's because they have to come through from the eastern side, facing all these nations. Now, their land was beyond Jordan. Now, from the land of Moab, Israel was supposed to proceed across Jordan, of course, without Moses. And their land and possession was on the other side of Jordan, as the Bible has mentioned. So they nicely asked the Amorites a passage. Not only did they refuse, but their king, Sihon, who ruled over Heshbon, gathered a great army to make war with them. But the Lord delivered them into the hands of Israel, and they were utterly destroyed. Thus the land of the Amorites became Israel's possession. Israel took over all the land of the Amorites from who lived in that country, capturing all of it from Arnon to Jabbok and from the desert up until Jordan. So, as it says, and like I said last week, that you should visit the book of Deuteronomy. In that chapter, Moses sums it up nicely, better than the main book that we are dealing with. And so that's what he says. So the Lord our God also gave into our hands Og, king of Bashan, and his army. We struck them down, leaving no survivors. At that time, we took all the cities. There were not one of the 60 cities that we did not take from them. The whole region of Og, kingdom of Bashan, all these cities were fortified with high walls and with gates and bars, and there were also great many unwalled villages. We completely destroyed them, and we had done as we have done with Sihor, king of Heshbon, destroying every city, men, women, and children. Well, nowadays we call that genocide, right?
Yes, sir.
Genocide it was, because they had to wipe out all the nations. And reason why I wanted you to read Deuteronomy chapter 1, chapter 2, and chapter 3. Moses states it quite clearly. There were nations they were not supposed to fight, and the reasons why. Israel was supposed to have neighbors. Israel was supposed to have friends. Were those friends children of God? No, they worshipped images. They did according to their own will. But God is not a cruel supreme being who wants to wipe out everything that doesn't serve him. He had tolerance for them. For instance, if you read those chapters, especially this is from Deuteronomy chapter 3, verse 3 to 6. When they were passing through the land of Moab, he said to them, you shall not touch anything. You shall not even try to take their land. These are Lord's. You remember Lot, Abraham's nephew. These are Lot's descendants. When they were passing through Edom, he said the same thing. You cannot do anything here. For the mountain of Seir and the Lord of Edom, it's Esau. Esau was Jacob's brother. They went to the lands of the Ammonites. The sons of Ammon, if you remember, they are also the descendants of Lot. God told them that proceed on your way. Don't touch anything. These are your relatives too. If you start trouble with these people, I'm not going to be with you. So Israel had to have friends and neighboring nations who were not necessarily God's fear, who were not worshiping God like them. But God wanted them to, like the Egyptians, who were once their slave masters. God always had a soft spot for certain nationalities for reasons beyond our mental comprehension. So Israel took from these two kings of the Amorites the territory east of the Jordan, God as far as Mount Hermon, which includes all the towns, plateau, and all of Gilead. I'm sure when you read the Old Testament, you'll come across Gilead a lot. Initially, it was not part of Canaan or promised land of the Israelite kingdom, but it was taken away from the Amorite nation. And up to Mount Hermon, we have read about Mount Hermon, which is in northern Israel, which is one of the most beautiful sights you can ever see. They say in summer, that's why when they were talking about behold how good and how pleasant, they talk of Mount Hermon, which during summer, in winter, it's got snow. But in summer, as the snow melts, the dew from Hermon will flow, and then it will water all the surrounding places, and those valleys will be very, very beautiful. Now you understand why someone in the book of Psalms would say, as the dew of Hermon. Yes, now you know the story behind. So the Israelites conquered everything, which includes the towns plateau of all Gilead and Bashan and Salcah, Edrei, towns of all kingdom and Bashan. Now, if you look at the map, we will go to the map later on after this. It was a large chunk of territory. It was not supposed to be their territory, but it became theirs simply because the king of Bashan and Heshbon, the king fought against the children of Israel when they were asking for a thoroughfare to go to cross Jordan and go to their lands. But by default, those lands became theirs. I would ask Chief, while we are still on this, to read from the book of Judges, chapter 11. I just want to show you something. Let's just pause a little bit. I think 19 or 18. 11. Over 19 or 18, from 18 full and down. But sorry.
Judges chapter number 11 from verse 18 going down. Then they went along through the wilderness and compassed the land of Edom and the land of Moab, and came by the east side of the land of Moab, and pitched on the other side of Arnon, but came not within the border of Moab, for Arnon was the border of Moab. And Israel sent messengers unto Sihon, king of the Amorites, the king of Heshbon. And Israel said unto him, Let us pass, we pray thee, through thy land into my place. But Sihon trusted not Israel to pass through his coast. But Sihon gathered all his people together and pitched in Jahaz and fought against Israel. And the Lord God of Israel delivered Sihon and all his people into the hand of Israel, and they smote them. So Israel possessed all the land of the Amorites, the inhabitants of that country. And they possessed all the coast of the Amorites from Arnon even unto Jabbok, and from the wilderness even unto Jordan. So now the Lord God of Israel had dispossessed the Amorites from before his people Israel, and shouldest thou possess it? Amen. Hold on, Saint. Sifiso seems to be struggling with his mic.
Yeah. Yes. While is it okay? Why I made him to read the book of Judges, that particular part. Jephthah, yes. Jephthah is the judge. It's 300 years afterwards. He was relating that story to one of the kings of the Amorites when they wanted that land back. You remember the war that Jephthah had to fight against the Amorites. Now, I chose that portion in the book of Judges so that it could be clear to everybody what exactly happened, because he explains it so well. So that's 300 years afterwards, after the Lord told them that they should defeat Og and Sihor and take away their lands, and it should be their possession. Skip. Huh? Okay. Okay. All right. I'll show you the map afterward. That's fine. Now, you go to the book of you go to the book. You go to the book of Numbers chapter 32 and 32 especially. Since they have now acquired a new territory and they were told that initially their lands were across Jordan, but after defeating these nations, the Amorite nation, they had a large chunk of territory in their hands. The three tribes, the Reubenites, the Gadites, and half of the Manasseh tribe, approached Moses. Well, the Gadites and the Reubenites were men,
our brothers,
who had lots and lots of cattle, livestock. And then when they looked at that place or that land, it was suitable for livestock. And then they went to Moses and spoke to him about it. Look, we know that God said that we should, our possession, all of us as the 12 tribes are supposed to have the land across Jordan. But we love this country and may you please give it to us. So read the Bible from the books of Numbers chapter 32, verse 1 to 4. The Reubenites and the Gadites, who had very large herds of flocks, saw the lands of Jazer, Gilead were suitable for livestock. So they came to Moses and Eleazar the priest and said, and the leaders of the community and said said, Atarot, Dibon, Jazer, Namzi, Alias, Bia, Nebo, Beyond the land Lord subdued before the people of Israel are suitable for livestock, and your servants have livestock. If we have found favor in your eyes, they said, let this land be given to your servant as a possession. Do not make us cross Jordan. So what is important now, one thing that you should note is that it's not all the tribes who got their possession or their property across Jordan. So there were three tribes who were given possession while Moses was still alive. They were given possession in the banks of Jordan before you could cross, go to the other side of Jordan. So in a nutshell, I would say divide Israel into two, Lower Israel and Upper Israel, or Greater Israel and Minor Israel. So this land which they took away from these kings, that's why it was given to this particular tribe to settle in. And you will learn that in the Psalms, especially Psalms 137 and all that, even though Israelites fought a lot of kings and defeated many kings, but they always speak about defeating the king of the Amorites, Og and Sihor, simply because it was not in their plan that they would come across these people and fight them and take away their lands. These people provoked them, and God gave them, God made sure that these nations that I've mentioned and their kings are defeated by the children of Israel and their lands are taken away. So Moses gave this land to the above mentioned tribes because the Gadites and the Reubenites were livestock farmers and found the land suitable for stock farming. Of the land that we took over, at the time I gave the Reubenites, the Gadites, the territory north of Aror and Anon Gorge, including half the hill country of Gilead, together with its towns. The rest of Gilead and also of Bashan, the kingdom of Og, I gave to the half tribe of Manasseh. We'll deal with the half tribe of Manasseh later on, so that you should understand what happened. The conditions, however, since these people wanted to settle and didn't want to cross Jordan, Moses
For Sabbath School.
Moses was not pleased with that, because he thought that they didn't want to help their brothers to fight, or maybe in the wars that were going to occur the other side of Jordan. So he went to them and said, you want the land now, you will read the book of Exodus, Numbers chapter 32. How about your brothers who are going to die and perish during those long wars that they're going to be fighting while trying to get to possess the Holy Land? So the Reubenites and Gadites said to them, no, we're not going to do that. What is going to happen, all the women, old people, children will settle in here, while all able-bodied men go up front to help the children of Israel conquer the promised land. So those words were good to Moses, and they made an agreement. Let's go ahead. Yeah. Yes, this is the map that I wanted to show you. The place in red that you can see there's a river Jordan there in the middle. And you can tell that that land, which was on the other side of Jordan, it was a huge territory, as Moses was trying to, as Moses was explaining in both Numbers and as well as Deuteronomy chapter 3. You can just tell it's almost the same size as the land across the River Jordan. That is why the Israelites kept on talking about it even long after this battle had happened in the book of Psalms, that God gave us power to defeat Bashan and to defeat Heshbon and Og and Sihor, the kings of the Amorites. This is a huge piece of land. It's very huge. And you can tell, if you look at this map, it's according to the tribes of Israel. There are 12 of different colors signifies that. You can see the land of Issachar, the land of Manasseh, half the tribe of Manasseh, and the Gad, Reuben, Judah, and Ephraim. You can tell the small land belongs to Issachar over there, the red dot in the map. Will also come to will deal with how the land was distributed as well. Because if you look at the Manasseh tribe, had the largest chunk of the territory. So you would think when you are sitting alone, because Judah was the favorite, when we're most of the time favorite, you would think that they would be given the best part of the land, the biggest chunk of the land. No, it was not like that. Let's go to the next slide. Now, these are the rules for land distribution. You'll get that in Numbers chapter 26, verse 52 to 56. The Lord said to Moses, the land is to be allotted to them as an inheritance based on the number of names. To a larger group, give a larger inheritance. And to a smaller group, a smaller one. Each is to receive its inheritance according to the number of those listed. Be sure that the land is distributed by lot. What each group inherits will be according to the names of its ancestral tribes. Each inheritance is to be distributed by a lot among the larger and smaller groups. I'm sure you who have played games and stuff like that, you know what a lot is. It's something like a dice game or something that you do not decide, but it's decided by whatever objects you use. If you throw it this way and it says this, and the other person has said maybe tail or head, the one who gets, that's how I can simply try and explain what a lot is. Yes. And you go to the 24th chapter. The Lord said to Moses, these are the names of the men who are assigned the land for you as an inheritance. Eleazar the priest and Joshua the son of Nun, and appoint one leader from each tribe to help assign the land. This is how it worked. They would cast a lot, and obviously according to their numbers, if you are a smaller tribe, that's too bad for you. You are going to get the smaller portion. If you are a large tribe, you are going to get a larger portion. But that task was not done haphazardly. It was done by Joshua. Remember, Joshua was going to take the place of Moses, and Eleazar had already taken the place of Aaron the priest, the high priest. And from each and every tribe, you appoint the head of the tribe to help with that particular administrative task. As I've already, it was a task assigned to a leader with the help of the high priest. It was supposed to be done in a fair manner according to the tribes' numbers, not according to the status of the tribes. Right, I'm sure that's quite clear. Now you ask yourself, because God has said the Levites are not supposed to have any possession, because they are meant to serve in God's temple all the time. Now, this is how the Bible explains it. Command the children of the Israelites to give the Levite towns to live in from inheritance of Israelites will possess, and give them pasture lands around the towns. Then they will have towns to live in, and pasture lands for the cattle they own and all their other animals. The pasture lands around the towns that they give the Levites will extend 1,000 of cubits from town wall. Outside the town, measure 2,000 cubits of the east side, 2,000 of the south side, 2,000 of the west, and 2,000 of the north, with the town in the center. They will have this area as pastoral lands for the towns, cities of refuge. 6 of the towns you give to the Levites will be the cities of refuge, to which a person who has killed someone may flee. In addition, give them 42 other towns. In all, you must give the Levites 48 towns together with the pastoral lands. The towns you give the Levites from the land the Israelite possess are to be given in a portion to the inheritance of the tribe. Take many towns from the tribe that has many, and take few towns from that has few. This is quite simple. You needed the Levites everywhere so that they should help those particular tribes, whether they're in the tribe of Issachar or the Zebulon or Manasseh or Ephraim or Gath or whoever. There should be people of God saving them with the sacrifices and all those things. So God commanded the Israelites that they should, each and every tribe should allocate towns for the Levites so that they should dwell among them, and they most of the time they should be in the center so that they should be accessible to everybody. And all in all, these were 48 towns, as you have seen. Now, if Sabbath School questions, someone asks you how many towns did the Levites have in Israel, it's 48. And among those, they're supposed to be cities of refuge. Now, you need to go to Moses' law. I will just make you understand this portion. If you kill someone in Israel, it was an eye for an eye kind of a rule. You kill, you get killed. You brought before the court and they look at your case and you'll get killed in the same manner you've killed the person. However, God had made a provision because it's not all the time when people died that, or maybe that they were killed intentionally. At times, they looked at it from that angle, that at times people would be fighting and maybe someone slaps the other person, maybe it's epileptic or stuff like that, that person dies. It was not the intention to kill, no hatred harbored. You need to be reading Moses' law, the Torah, then you'll understand. And when the evidence is brought before the judge and all the people, such a person was not sentenced to death. He didn't qualify to die like that because he didn't intend to kill. However, because there was a rule that eye for an eye was supposed to apply, they created cities of refuge. That once he's not found guilty of killing a person intentionally, he should run to those cities for his own safety. Because if the relative of the person of the victim sees that person roaming the street, they have the right to kill him because of the eye for an eye kind of a rules. But once he is in those cities of refuge, they can't touch him. How long did a person stay in those cities, in the city of refuge? As long as the high priest who declared that the person or who anointed him to run to the city of refuge is still alive, would live in the city of refuge for that time period until he dies. Now, if he lives for 40 years, he's got to wait for 40 years. If he lives shorter than that, then he's a free person. He can go back to his people or to the community. And if it tells one person to one day, maybe he wants to see his friends and stuff like that, and then he decides to take a chance and leave the city, he was free to do that. You're not forced. But the problem was if the Avengers see you and they kill you, they wouldn't be found guilty. So it was for your own good as a person who's affected by this kind of a crime. It was for your best interest to stay in the city of refuge as long as the high priest was still alive. So that is why we have to have. I had to explain. Well, the city of refuge. Yes. Let's go ahead. Yes. Remember, we're talking about the half of the Manasseh tribe, the Manasseh tribe. So it was for me something that I've always wanted to know. How come that we never speak of the half of the tribe of Judah or of the tribe of Naphtali or anyone else? But it is explained so that you should know, and when you read it in context, you should know where it comes from. So the family heirs of the ten of Gilead, the son of Manasseh, who were from the clans of the descendants of Joseph. Remember, Manasseh was the son of Joseph. Came and spoke before Moses and the leaders, the heads of Israelite families. They said, when the Lord commanded my Lord to give the land as an inheritance to the Israelites by lot, he ordered you to give the inheritance of our brother Zelophehad to his daughters. Now suppose they marry men from other Israelite tribes. Then their inheritance will be taken from their ancestral inheritance and added to that of the tribe they marry into. And so part of the inheritance allotted to us will be taken away. When the year of Jubilee from the Israelite comes, the inheritance will be added to that of the tribe into which they marry, and their property will be taken from the tribal inheritance of our ancestors. Then, at the Lord's command, Moses gave his order to the Israelites. What the tribe of the descendants of Joseph is saying is right. This is what the Lord commands for Zelophehad daughters. They may marry anyone they please, as long as they marry within their father's tribal clan. Meaning, because they were from the Manasseh tribe, this particular man didn't have sons. He only had daughters. They came before Moses because when the distribution of the land was occurring, they were worried that their father's inheritance will be gone. Because if daughters marry into other tribes, let's say Judah tribe, the man and his children are going to take it away. So they came to Moses and God helped him to resolve this matter, that for them to remain safe so that this should not leave the Manasseh tribe, this half tribe of Manasseh who happen not to have male siblings, they should only marry within, if it pleases them, because they were going to lose the possession, they should only marry the brothers of the Manasseh tribe. So even if, no matter how much he liked someone from the other tribe, but because of the possession of their father, because there was no heir, a male heir, and they were risking of losing that possession, they were compelled to look from within the Manasseh tribe, so that the inheritance should not go to another tribe. I'm sure this is quite clear. We all these days we deal with this kind of things, especially when it comes to property laws and stuff like that. So it is what it is. It's like exactly how we treat, the law was so advanced that it's exactly how we treat the property law today in most advanced countries. In other countries, once the daughter gets married and stuff like that, they lose their possession. But here we see the children of Israel, the daughters had a say in the property. And you go back to those times, women were not counted worthy to possess a strategic asset like land. But this one, God was so advanced, God's law was so advanced that it gave them the birthright to inherit their father's land. So let's continue. They say, They may marry anyone they please, so long as they marry within their father's tribal clan, so that the property should not go to another clan. No, note this one. No inheritance of Israel is to pass from one tribe to another. For every Israelite shall keep the tribal inheritance of their ancestors. Every daughter who inherits land in any Israel tribe must marry someone in her father's tribal clan, so that the land should not go to someone else. So that every Israelite will possess the inheritance of their ancestors. No inheritance may pass from one tribe to another, for each Israel tribe is to keep the land it inherits. Numbers chapter 36, verse 1 to 9. God's law are fair, God's law are advanced. Let's go to the. So now you understand the history of the half tribe of the Manasseh tribe. So, in a nutshell, this is what we come to the end of our trilogy. And I'm sure the whole series was, especially that we didn't know as to what informed other things in the Bible. The book of Numbers have helped us. All along, I also got educated along the way because I thought the Levites were just around the temple in Jerusalem. They wouldn't go anywhere else. But now we've learned that they were throughout, they were everywhere. They had 48 cities throughout all the tribes of Israel. Now we have also learned that the daughters too were entitled to their inheritance. It wasn't everything, it wasn't like way back in the days where everything had to be given to the male heirs alone. And we also learned that the other half of Israel was not supposed to be a part of Israel, but it happened by default or by mistake when the king of the Amorites started attacking the children of Israel, and they wiped them out, totally wiped them off from the surface of the of the earth. And that part, those parts which we always hear in the Bible, like your Gilead, Jabbok, Mount Hermon, and all those were not inheritance of the children of Israel, but it was given to them after they have defeated these other nations. Now, why this book overlaps into Deuteronomy? Deuteronomy, if you read, Moses is left, it's shortly before they cross the river Jordan. It's got a beautiful preface. He states everything. It was written in the plains of Moab. So that's why the first 3 chapters belong, when we do the studies of Numbers, it's a summary of what exactly happened from the beginning of the journey up until they reached where they were. And Moses is summing that up. So Deuteronomy, as I've already explained, is the repetition of the law. Moses is explaining or giving the law to those who were born in the wilderness, because if you go to the book of Leviticus, it's full of law, mid-laws, everything. It was those laws were given to the older generation. But now we're dealing with the Joshua generation who were not even at Mount Sinai, who didn't hear God. So Moses had to repeat those laws. That is why we have the book of Deuteronomy. You go to the 5th chapter of Deuteronomy, even the 10 commandments, as they are in Exodus chapter 20, you'll find them in Deuteronomy chapter 5. So we cannot deal with Deuteronomy because it does not deal, it's Deuteronomy and Numbers are the same book, just that in Deuteronomy, he's writing, Deuteronomy also Moses is writing the law again, or giving it to the new generation. And also he's got 2 farewell speeches because he was about to leave now. I think I will go back to my studies. I think it took him 1 month to write the book because they were about to cross Jordan, and it was on the 12th month. And remember, the children of Israel crossed over on the 1st month. Then Moses had to remain behind while the others had to cross over. So he had to write the last book. And the other important thing about the book of Deuteronomy is that Moses had to reverse the curse Jacob, the curse that, you remember when Jacob was blessing his 12 sons, and you would remember what he said to Reuben, thou shalt not excel. You remember that curse. So a curse can be reversed. Then Moses was reversing that. And he said, let Reuben live and not die. To reverse what Jacob said. So it was about all of the two speeches, farewell speeches, the laws, as well as to reverse the curse Jacob cast on the tribe of Reuben. So Deuteronomy, you can read it on your own. You will read it with an understanding what is it all about, what it entails. All I was dealing with was to make sure that you understand what the children of Israel went through the wilderness, and the crux of that journey is covered in the book of Numbers, the whole book of Numbers. I think